Live from Metropolis, this is Derailed Trains of Thought. Well, hello out there, all our one listener. But hopefully there'll be more once we actually get the podcast out. But yeah, welcome back to Derailed Trains of Thought. It has been a long time. Hello, Nick.
Hello, Tim.
How are you doing?
Pretty good. I'm getting used to this new setup here.
Yeah. This is kind of fun now because we're doing a live stream. This is our first time doing this, and it's fun. We actually get feedback from someone who's listening.
Yeah, we have like 10 programs running to make sure that we don't crash while doing this thing. But...
Yeah. So hopefully this is all up and running and being saved for posterity for the people who can't listen live. But currently we're here in Metropolis. It's slowly getting put back together.
There's a lot of nice background music most times.
Yes, thankfully.
A lot of people just kind of stare and gesture very wildly while they're talking.
Yes, exactly. You know, I just realized something we did forget to open up. We were gonna have our Google Docs thing out for all this.
Oh yeah. We can do that as we're.
So yeah, we'll talk. Go ahead and kind of set us up here, Nick. What's going on today?
Well, we're back after, I don't know how long. It's been most of a year, I think.
I think the last one we did was in January.
January?
Well, at least that's the last one we released. I think we actually recorded it like back in December.
Okay.
So
we're trying to reboot this thing, get back to talk about storytelling in various formats. Doing live stream, basically, so that we don't have to edit the thing. Yeah. And it seems like a little more fun.
Yeah, it's just something a little different, and it kind of became more and more a necessity for me because with my other work stuff, I just don't have time to edit anything else. And Nick's phone is ringing.
Yes, we're in my kitchen right now.
I know, we're in Metropolis. Your kitchen in Metropolis.
Oh, yeah, I have a nice flat here.
Yeah, you rented a condo just for purposes of this podcast, so you better answer that.
I visit here quite often, actually. It's a nice vacation spot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you didn't know that?
Are you just going to go to the voicemail? Oh, that's right. You're okay. Yeah. So yeah, any really major flubs we might, but some of this crazy stuff we'll just leave in here. We might edit some of the other stuff, maybe.
No, I think we should just leave it full on authentic. I think it'd be more fun that way. Much more.
Certainly more very chaotic.
A lot of character.
Yeah.
And come on, it's called Derailed Trains of Thought for a reason.
Well, okay, I suppose that's true.
So.
All right, so I'm pulling up our drive so we know
what we're actually going to talk about. We actually thought ahead this time, which is unlike normal.
Yeah, well, we figured we needed to sort of try to plan it out a little bit better, so we're not stumbling across like a madman the entire time. Which one are you pointing to?
I'll go to the Mixer actual page. I want to see some of these.
Yes. I thought
right here.
Oh, is that the chat? Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we can chat with people while we're doing this thing.
Yep, Aaron says authenticity rocks. So it's yay! We're gonna have to have Aaron here with us recording at some point.
Oh, certainly.
At some point, we're gonna have to do a comics episode, I think.
Yes. It'll be interesting to see. Have you talked to him about your rant tonight?
I don't think so.
I know that'll be interesting.
I knew Greg knew that we were going to have a rant tonight, but actually that reminds me of something else I forgot to tell you, but I'll save that for later in the episode.
Okay, so anyway, we'll do can we go ahead with our first section here?
Yes, actually. I'm trying to remember where are we here? You know what? We might have had all kinds of music playing. I just realized I forgot to actually turn off some of our previous stuff. So
we don't yet have a sound mixing studio.
So if you heard all kinds of weird music going on at the same time, sorry. I don't know if we'll even be able to edit that out now that I think about it. Okay, so anyway. So let's go ahead. We'll go into our first segment here, and that is going to be Project Update. So yes, I will be more careful about that in the future. Oh my. So anyway, Project Update. Nick, you've had some big things coming out lately.
I have had some big things lately. I guess about a month ago, my fantasy novel, The Unremarkable Squire, was released. And I'm
Yes.
busy trying to find ways to promote that thing.
Which I think we talked about the Unremarkable Squire way back in our very first episode when you finished writing it.
Yes, it's been quite the ordeal lately. I mean, in the last couple years, getting it published and editing it, and
Because that was 2010, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Well, I started it back in like 2003.
Right,
So-
but it's been an ongoing project since the very beginning
Yes.
of this podcast.
Because I think it just finished the ending for the first episode we ever did.
Yes, I think that's right.
So the Unremarkable Squire is kind of a light-hearted, humorous fantasy about this. Just this guy named Obed Kainos who kind of is thrown into being a squire for a kind of arrogant knight called Sir Lance Valentino, and then Obed, through a variety of accidents, ends up having quite a role to play.
Mm-hmm.
So. I mean, that's kind of the thumbnail sketch. But there's lots of characters, there's lots of dry humor, cool ending action scene.
Yep. Yeah. And I do have to, I should say, give some thanks here, because Nick actually dedicated this book to me. It was very nice of you.
Tim from, back in college, you need to finish this thing. So I thought, well, I finished now. I better should dedicate to Tim.
Might be one of the longest readers.
Yeah. You and David Miller. Because back in the Story Project days, he stole.
That's right. Well, two of the two characters from Story Project got their name from this. One was yours.
Sir Lance. Oh, he wasn't a knight in.
He wasn't.
Story Project.
In Story Project, he was just Lance Founds,
Yep.
and which was a much nicer character than he actually is in the book.
Yes.
And then,
they really don't have much overlap in characterization. Just the names were fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of the
idea.
The idea, yeah. Both Lances are kind of flamboyant.
Yeah.
Big and boisterous, and
Yeah.
both Obeds are kind of mysterious, although in two completely different ways.
Now, our one listener here was participating in Story Project.
That's
so
true.
he knows what we're talking about for once.
Wow. It's so refreshing. But yeah, actually, so yeah, that was a nice touch, but it actually did say, my mom did actually say it kind of made her tear up a little bit. So it's
nice.
So that's cool.
Otherwise, just normal life.
Well, you have other projects you're working on, like your short story.
Oh, my short, and actually, that's true. Thank you. The short story, The Clock Tower, should have come out tomorrow. Actually.
Oh, okay.
Just a short story I've had in my head for 2 years.
Well, you've been talking about writing a clock tower story
for ages.
Yeah,
I like clock towers.
Probably at least as long as I've been talking with you about the Squire.
Yes, that's true. So I started it 2 years ago, and then I couldn't figure out how to keep moving on it. So it's finished. All that talk about how long it took doesn't necessarily reflect on how awesome a story it is. I think it's a good story, but after I say I've been working on it for 2 years, it makes people think it's ooh. And it's a nice story.
It's been kind of an off and on sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, just trying to find a way to do it. And I really enjoy it. I think it's a really good story.
Does it live up to? I mean, you said on your website that doesn't live up to the cover image you picked out for it. But does it live up to? I know you said you were inspired to do a clock tower story from Great Mouse Detective, and
Puss in Boots travels around the world.
Oh, okay, yeah. I thought and Castle Cagliostro.
And Castle Cagliostro. It's it actually is not action oriented in any way.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, that surprises me. I thought it would be.
It's hard for me to write a short story that's action oriented. I mean, most of my short story ideas tend to be more about ideas, and so the Clock Tower is more of an idea.
Okay. Yeah. Aaron says he also remembers you doing a Clock Tower story when you heard a remix from Castlevania.
Because they had the awesome remix of the Clock Tower song
from
Castlevania.
Oh, from Castle.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah, man, good memory, Aaron. I don't even remember that. But yeah, a Clock Tower has been a thing for me, and I'll probably throw them in something else. But this, I don't know if I knew it when I started writing it, but then lately I've read a lot of Bradbury. I've read Illustrated Man, and the Dandelion Wine just got done with Quicker Than the Eye. And I think that's helped me find how to finish the story.
Okay.
So there's a lot of that sort of story in, I guess. It's more of the idea than action in this case.
You just said Ray Bradbury, so that's all the more reason Aaron is going to love you for this thing.
It's all all Aaron all the time tonight.
Well, when you know people are listening,
It's
then,
exciting.
Then you get to, kind of pander to them a bit. So anyway, if you're listening to this after the fact, this will encourage you to listen live next time.
Yeah.
So
otherwise than that, I'm not teaching this year.
Yes.
And partly because I hope to get some writing done.
Stern and Fred.
That is actually
Stern and Fred.
here.
Oh, cool.
Is what I have written of the second part of Stern and Fred.
In your hand.
In my hands. To refresh me what's going on. It's about 25,000 words. The second third.
Oh, the second third.
The second third.
Okay.
Of it.
Of Fred's part. Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I thought you said you had like 90,000 words.
Yeah, I have 90,000 words written or typed.
Altogether.
Altogether. The first section is 60,000 words, which is substantial.
Okay.
So that's what I've got going here.
Brosman said panda, 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 which I was like, I'm not sure what that means at first, but then he's like, oh, because we said pander. So, anywho.
All right, so Tim, what have you been up to?
Well, basically, as far as the creative field, a lot of that's taken from my two jobs, my full-time job doing stuff with mainly archery tag. The people that do archery tag have like half a dozen other companies that they also run, but mainly is archery tag is my focus. And so I do promotions for them for their YouTube channel, and haven't really done anything that I'd say has been a big project-wise, but we have been getting better, I think, lately at posting more regular updates on our YouTube channel, which I like. I hope to get to a place where we're doing something, even if it's not something big, if we're posting something on our YouTube channel like once a week. And usually right now that's something, they're always going to events and putting up stuff from that. So, and usually I'm trying to do show a little highlight from that, or if they met someone really interesting that has a really neat story to tell about how, we just did one about someone who had never tried archery before, and by the end they were shooting bullseyes, hitting bolt. If you don't know what archery tag is, it's basically like paintball or dodgeball, but with bows and foam tipped arrows. I think I mentioned on here before. But anyway, that's what's going on, and I hope to do some bigger projects sometime soon. Just sometimes that's the harder thing to do than the little things. But so there's that. Also been keeping busy with my other job, a part-time job for my church, doing videos. I do video announcements for them almost every week. Sometimes we just replay stuff. But church has been really busy lately because it's been growing amazingly. We just moved into a new auditorium. And which we almost broke attendance records just the opening day. So we're like, oh man, I really hope we don't have to build another building right away.
Nice.
So, but no, that's been good. So yeah, keeping busy there. And then there's also our collaborative project still going on.
Yes, Children of the Wells, which I think we had mentioned.
We had hinted at it for a long time, and then
previously,
and then I think we finally just I think we spelled out what it was.
But it hadn't started. We had started in April.
Yeah, so it's been unfortunate we haven't actually gotten a chance to talk about it on the podcast until now.
And maybe in another episode we might go in depth about some aspect of it. But largely, it's a serialized fantasy world. Mm-hmm. And it's set up almost episodically, where one author will write basically a novella that's serialized about a character in it's complete, like an episode of TV, but has cliffhanger sort of ending and keeps moving. And we have the first episode, so-called novella, was The Select's Bodyguard, about a scientific city called Jalcian, and just suffered a giant disaster. And the main story is this guy named Bron trying to protect this basically magic user named Clea. Mm-hmm. And then we have two going on right now. Yep.
So the first novella is finished and is available. You can read the whole thing on the website, childrenofthewells.com, or you can download an ebook for.
That's you pay what you want, free, or if you want to, if you like us, you can give us money.
Yeah. And so that's all complete, but then we have two new novellas. One is a sequel to The Select's Bodyguard that's going on right now. It's being serialized. And another one about a completely different character in a completely different city. And that's being written by Nathan Marchand, who's been on here before, and he's said we name drop him a lot.
Yes. Nathan Marchand.
And then the sequel to Select's Bodyguard is actually being written by Laura Fisher, who has also been on this podcast.
Yes.
If you haven't noticed, we tend to reuse people a lot. We have good friends who are like, hey, we're going to draft you in like all kinds of projects.
And it usually works.
Usually, yeah. So yeah, that's going pretty well, and we're excited about that. How far? Let's see. I'm trying to think of how far those two novels in
The
right
Fall
now.
of the House of Kaiser,
Which is Nathan's.
which is Nathan's, is winding towards the end.
Yeah.
It has a couple weeks left, but it's winding towards the end. And the Doctor's Assistant, which is Laura's, is probably not quite halfway.
Okay. It just started like chapter 6, right?
I think so.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't remember now.
Okay. So yeah, it's good time to jump in on some of that, and we will get you in on this eventually at some point, Aaron. I think we have an idea for how you can be a part of it. But anywho,
I think that's a rather lengthy project update.
it is a rather lengthy. Well, it's been a while.
It's been quite a while, and I'm
had-
sure there's more we'll add in future.
Yes, at a future time. But in the meantime, it's time for the meat and the heart of this podcast, and
Meat and heart,
the meat.
like chicken hearts. Those are.
Well, something. I was kind of combining meat and potatoes and heart and soul, and it came out really kind of a whole bunch of different body parts. But anyway, that segment is Story School. Okay, Story School is when we talk about anything. It could be anything related to stories, basically. Sometimes we get very philosophical. Sometimes we're just kind of fanboying about something we like.
Occasionally will be practical, but not usually.
Yes.
Like way back at the beginning, we did like how to manage your time,
Yeah.
or how do you manage your time was more like how it was.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't really have the answers, but we pretend we do. So anyway, this time we're going to tackle... let's see if I can find my Google Docs here. This time we're talking about realism in fantasy. And this is the part where we really need our notes for. Realism in fantasy, or I put as a subtitle for this, the art of suspending disbelief. This topic kind of came about because, well, I was ranting to Nick about reactions to a certain movie this summer. And I'll just go ahead and go into that now. We were talking about Man of Steel, which was a very divisive film among fans of the genre. I mean, it did very well at the box office, but different people had very differing opinions on this movie. Before I go into my rant about it, Nick, real quick, what is kind of your quick take on it?
My quick take on Man of Steel?
Yeah.
I don't know if I have a quick take on it. You put me on the spot. Well, I enjoyed it. I thought it was entertaining. But largely, I think my perception of the divisiveness is people having ideas of what Superman should do versus of the Superman they made for the movie.
Right.
With a twist thrown in by Zachary Snyder's style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because not everyone likes Zachary Snyder's. Is it Zachary or just Zach? It's just Zach.
Hey, I got a brother named
Snyder.
Zach, so
Yeah, okay.
Zack Snyder's style,
Right.
Because he's very over the top in many ways.
Yes, he is. Yeah, and if longtime listeners to this podcast have know, I've talked about Superman before, and I really wanted this to be a good movie, or like a popular movie, because I felt like Superman just hasn't been utilized well enough, especially by Hollywood, but also because like Superman Returns was a movie I liked when I first saw it, but then the more I thought about it afterwards, things bugged me a lot. Yeah, Aaron says example about Zack Snyder 300.
Yeah, exactly.
Which you have to remember, Aaron's listening to this a little delayed, so that's
true.
why his comments are kind of trailing off sometimes. But anyway, but yeah, Superman Returns just bugged me because it basically had Superman being a deadbeat dad. Like he fathers a child, then goes off to explore the galaxy for 5 years, and no one hears of him. And like you're trying to portray Superman as this really perfect, godlike figure, which I think is a valid way of doing Superman. The whole deadbeat dad thing really undercuts what you're going for.
And you really enjoy kind of the perfect hero.
Yeah.
We've had that discussion before.
Yeah, and I really do enjoy the perfect hero, but it was pretty clear, I felt, from the trailers to this that wasn't exactly what they were going for. And I mean, I'll admit I was worried about that. It did seem that they were going to go with, Clark, really worrying about how he should use his powers, about, if people would be afraid of him. There was a little bit of an X-Men / Spider, it was kind of a Marvel feel, to be honest, to the way they were going about it. Which, it was, to be honest, wouldn't be the way I would have chosen it. That being said, I was generally pleased with the execution. If that was the method you were going to use, I felt they handled it pretty well. I felt like they went the whole way with it. And most importantly, I felt personally that they kept Clark's inner goodness, in the sense that he constantly wanted to help people, but because of his father's influence. And side note, if any character was the most radically changed character in the story, is arguably Pa Kent. The whole trying to keep him, contained, not wanting him to do anything too obvious or anything like that. I think Pa Kent is the most different character. So, but Clark is different because of that. But I felt he was still wanting to do good. He still had that innate desire in him. He was still a very, very good character. So the whole debate about Man of Steel wound up, I think, really being, in a sense, about that last fight with Zod in Metropolis. The whole, Metropolis gets pretty torn up in this movie. I mean, there's lots of destruction. And I feel like a lot of that reaction is... I feel like a lot of the built-up frustration with blockbuster movies that have all these really scenes of death and destruction and stuff, like, I never saw it, but I know Battle Los Angeles or Battlefield Los Angeles was like that. The G.I. Joe movie was ridiculously, like, I didn't like they nuked London in the recent G.I. Joe movie, and I was like, they should be able to stop that. I mean, like, you don't let just, in a comic booky, corny, cheesy movie like that, where you want it to just be fun, you don't want to see like millions of people die. Yeah. Now, but I felt the destruction of Metropolis worked in this case, partly because it's Zack Snyder's style. Yeah. It's very over the top. The whole thing was kind of, it went along with the gods at war sort of feel. Yeah. Side note, this is my favorite Krypton that I've seen in probably any medium. I loved, Krypton is usually like a really weird planet. Sometimes they do, when comics do future or alien planets, it just comes out weird, and like, I'm glad Superman's not there anymore. I love the like Roman feel they did with Krypton, but that's a side note. So anyway, I felt a lot of the action was going well with the like I said, the whole gods at war thing that they were doing, and yet at the same time, it also fit in with this Clark is in over his head. This is a Superman who is, Aaron agrees, G.I. Joe is totally over the top. I'll read more of that comment later. But yeah, Superman is totally in over his head. He's not been, most other Superman movies have, and I guess let's go back. We'll jump back to the perfect hero thing real quick, and I will let you interject here, Nick, because I know I'm talking a lot.
No, I want you to go before I talk.
I know a lot of what people didn't like about this movie is they were like, Superman didn't save anyone. He let this whole city, get destroyed. And, and it was what was fascinating to me about this is that before this movie, you heard any of the popular scuttlebutt about Superman is that he was too perfect, that he's a Boy Scout, that he's too unrealistic. Here you have a movie where they're trying to be realistic. They're kind of saying this is a Clark that
doesn't have it all together.
He doesn't have it all together. He's not Christopher Reeves, who's been, fighting crime for years basically, and, can think quick about how to handle any given situation. This is a Superman that doesn't, he's in over his head. He's never been trained to...
He learned to fly like a week ago.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, even Smallville Clark Kent knew a lot more than that.
Yeah. He'd been Superman for like 10 years or 10 seasons at least before he actually started wearing the cape. And I've never seen an episode of Smallville, but that's what I know about it. So it really, really frustrated me because, like, I feel like I really felt like for the type of Superman story they were telling, and this was, I mean, there's no doubt about it. This is like an Elseworlds Superman story. You know, Elseworlds is the DC line of stories that are not really in the DC canon, like Red Sun. You know, what happened if Superman landed in Russia instead of the U.S. Yeah. And this is like an Elseworlds story. Granted, it's not the typical Superman. It's not a typical Christopher Reeve. But for this version of the story, I felt it was pretty valid. So, okay, anyway, I'll stop ranting for a little bit.
And I agree. I think, I thought this earlier today when I was like, what are we going to talk about? I was thinking, your concept is realism versus fantasy. Mm-hmm. And, you know, where did that come? You know, fantasy in this case would be a perfect Superman who knows what's going on, and all that. And they added the realism of, look, he doesn't know, he's figuring it out, he's kind of angsty, you know, the military doesn't trust him. Yeah. You know, he's like this god that, you know, could beat up the entire world if he wanted to. And I was thinking that movies, in some ways, have I'm going to spoil this world, a worldview. Not like they're selling a philosophical point of view, but they're like, this is the type of movie we're trying to be, and here are the sort of things we'll let ourselves get away with or not get away with. You know, Chinese action movies have a different, you know, there's certain things you accept because they've created this realm of possibility that you just, and you know, try to do that in G.I. Joe, you're like, what is this?
Well, okay, so to a certain extent, I mean, the G.I. Joe movie had...
Well, I didn't see G.I. Joe. I didn't see the new one, so...
Okay, this was my favorite part of the new G.I. Joe movie was ninjas rappelling along cliffside and having a fight, like, along the side of a cliff.
Well, but see,
that's awesome.
If they'd been jumping on top of trees, that would have been weird.
Okay, yeah, if they weren't doing
that. They had a heightened sense of ridiculous action. You know, and when you go to G.I. Joe, if you're not expecting that, you're gonna be weirded out. And I think the problem is Superman has so many different expectations from people that to do what is largely a very different and modern view, as opposed to the more mythic view, is really hard for people. I know I talked to Brian Scherschel, who's our classic movie commentator. He didn't like the movie at all. He'd much rather have a standard Christopher Reeve.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's really funny because here, like, you know, I've advocated before, I love that Superman is kind of a perfect hero. You know, I wrote that whole, like, essay, and I can go on spiels about that a lot. And I like that aspect of him in the comics. I don't know. Like, I think there's a certain moment where, like you say, you kind of have to go with the world that, you know, that they're setting up. You go with the creators.
Now, I will say... The addition of the almost over top speed, you know, Mach 20 fight scenes, which I thought was cool. I enjoyed it in the moment.
Yeah, I love that stuff.
But like, my dad went with us, and he thought some fight scenes went a little long, and I thought, well, if I had to go watch it immediately after, it might be a little long. And then you get into issues, not just the world they've created, but the way Snyder delivers action. And then that's an even more narrow thing. And so I can see maybe being okay with the Superman is portrayed, but not with the style, the technicality of the action.
I can see that. And I mean, I'll admit myself, I didn't feel like it was a perfect one. It wasn't a perfect movie. Like, even when, like, Zod came back down to Metropolis and they were getting ready for the next fight, I was kind of like, oh, we're really going to do this? I thought we were done. I mean, it was still turned out to be a cool fight, but I understand how people were, you know, kind of battle weary by that point.
But the thing is, the movie unapologetically from the beginning has a sci-fi leaning to it. So, you know, some of those kind of, you know, the battles are very sci-fi. The flying's very, you know, has that kind of edge to it.
And the Krypton, again, is very sci-fi.
Yeah, I mean, that's what sets it up, you know,
largely. The whole genetic engineering aspect.
So, but I do think there is this tension for people sometimes on how much fantasy or realism do they want. We've talked before, a lot of riff tracks mentality in movies comes from watching something and saying, oh, that's not how it would really happen. It's like, you know, you go watch some action movie and then you go watch Mythbusters and they show you the car won't blow up when you hit a wall. Which is true. And if you're watching, say, a Bourne movie, it shouldn't blow up.
Yes.
Because it's a realistic movie. But if you're watching, A-Team, if a tank's falling out of a plane, it can do crazy stuff. And that's not everyone's style, but I think that's a different issue from saying it's a bad movie.
Yes, that's true. And it does get tricky too, like you said, when you have different expectations. I mean, like the Bond movies are constantly changing how the level of realism to ridiculousness. I mean, like Casino Royale with Daniel Craig strives to be kind of, very realistic sort of thing. Then you get the Quantum of Solace, which I haven't seen, but my brother-in-law commented, is like, why did they have explosives on like every pillar of this parking garage? It became, there are moments that become so ridiculous. Then because you're sort of expecting us to go to a more realistic level, then some of the fantasy stuff rings a little hollow.
And I think largely the move of the general population or perception is towards realism.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I'm not seeing Game of Thrones. I just read a little bit of it back in the day, but it's a fantasy novel without much magic. It's very political. It's very, there's that. It's kind of the in thing now to give the realistic twist to a thing, which can be really interesting. Iron Man 3, he has post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous. I mean, he's a ridiculous superhero. I mean, he's not ridiculous, but he's just funny and over. He built like 200 Iron Mans. I mean, how much money did that take?
Well, again, that's a case where you want to have emotional realism to a certain extent. A lot of comic book movies nowadays, you want to have that emotional intelligence, in a sense, even if the concept of what the guy is doing is, pretty far-fetched.
I know back when Cloverfield came out, a lot of people complained that all the dialogue was all inane and vapid. They're just screaming, and like the first 20 minutes when they're just at the party, it's just like watching a whole movie. And I was like, yeah.
That's kind of the point.
I mean, but they didn't want that much realism, because that's how people actually talk. If you run away from a giant monster, you're not going to say anything intelligent.
Right. Well, I think Roger Ebert said that one time. It's like, if most movies talk the way people actually talk, it'd drive you crazy.
Now, like I remember Dr. Hensley, my writing teacher, saying you don't want to write people like they actually sound, because then it'd be boring. But in an experimental thing like Cloverfield, I think it worked. But people want the version of the thing they want.
Mm-hmm. Which
very profound thought from Nick.
They want the version of thing they want, because I mean, there are definitely times when the realism can detract from the fantasy, and there are times when the fantasy can detract from the feeling engaged with it.
And a really good movie you don't even think about it. I mean, and that's hard to pull off sometimes.
Yeah.
To drag you into so much that you're not even think about until after the fact. Oh, wait a second.
Yeah.
That wouldn't work, or this. And movies are largely emotional. Mm-hmm. I mean, they can be intellectual movies, but a lot of, at least blockbusters, connect the dots emotionally first and logically after. And and sometimes that's a cheap thing. Sometimes that's just bad writing.
Yeah. Well, it's really tricky too with our culture, where we're constantly reevaluating pop culture. Like, I think the web series How It Should Have Ended, the cartoon, I think it's funny, but I think that also takes a lot of cheap shots sometimes, because they'll go for like something that should be like an obvious answer. It's like, well, why didn't the filmmakers think of that? That just seems so obvious. Well, there's reasons why they didn't do this sort of thing. And I've complained to you about the How It Should Have Ended thing with Lord of the Rings, and people say this all the time. Like, I constantly hear this. I'm like, no, this is not a problem. The thing about why didn't they just take the Eagles into Mount Doom and just drop it in? Problem solved. It's not that easy. Like,
plus there's no story.
Yeah, for one, there would be no story, obviously. And then for another thing, you think that anyone's not just going to be able to see this group of eagles flying in? The ringwraiths would be all over that. Heck, Sauron would be all over that. He could see anything. One does not simply fly into Mordor.
I was waiting for that.
So, I don't know. For me, I feel like you want your story to feel like it holds water and it's realistic, but I also feel like there should be more. And I've said this before, and back in the How to Read a Story episode, and I feel like there there should be greater trust on the part of the audience. Like, if you want this to be a good story, work with the storyteller. Don't feel like you have to go back and pick it apart, all the time after that.
So, what do you think? Well, actually, I think before that, talking about, you said the alternate title for this discussion was The Suspension of Disbelief. And one of those movies that, sometimes people make a fantasy movie and try to make it very detailed, very realistic within its fantastic elements. John Carter, I felt, was like that,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very, it was pulpy. It was unabashedly pulpy.
Oh, yeah.
And it should have been.
Yeah.
But I feel like that movie, when I loved the movie, and it would, transport me to a whole nother world, but I felt like it was one of those movies that required you had to deeply invest in the world they were creating, or you could just sit back and be like, what are all these strange aliens, and why do they care about this? Fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think, and those movies are hard sell. And honestly, that's why sometimes, I've said this before, so I won't say it again. Go ahead.
Oh, I've repeated myself before
okay.
anyway, so go ahead.
I was just saying, every time I watch A New Hope, I watch it and think, there is like a sliver of a line separating this from a B movie. Especially, you watch the first 10 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
but it works somehow because it convinces you wholeheartedly
Mm-hmm.
what it wants to be.
Right. And I get, like, there's always going to be people who, they can't get into the fantasy sort of thing, like my dad, he couldn't get into the art. I said before, he couldn't really get into the artistic side of Hero with Jet Li, because you got people like dressed in different colors every time. You just see the artificiality of it. But if you're going into a sci-fi movie, you enjoy that sort of thing, then yeah, I think it behooves you to like you said, it's not necessarily that you're giving up, like that there has to be logical reasons. I mean, obviously
some movies are bad. They just they just jump logical, Sharknado.
Yeah. No, like that's meant to be bad.
I know. And when you watch it, you're like, no. You know what's the worst part? Did you watch that?
No.
Okay, the worst part is not that you expect the bad acting and the bad plotting and the bad graphics. What makes it almost unwatchable is the editing is just horrendous. It's just.
Man. Yeah, any one of those aspects can pretty derail a movie pretty quickly. But I like the way you put it. Like, you do have to be invested into Barsoom and to really enjoy John Carter. Because, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was like, I'm not really following what these white alien, the Watcher type guys.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not really following what their plan is, but I'll go with it. Awkward pause. I knew we'd get to one of these before.
Keep talking. I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, I think we've covered a lot but let's talk real quick because you have it in your outline here, and then we should probably try to wrap this up. What are some examples of a really good balance or really bad balance? Like you mentioned in your outline here, Scott Pilgrim, where like you have this really over the top.
And it just works. I mean, it works effortlessly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the amazing thing about that movie.
I think Edgar
The
Wright...
movie should have fallen apart.
Well, I think Edgar Wright, who the director of that, said that the way they kind of conceived it, that they worked it out is... Because if you haven't seen it, you've got all these really ridiculously over-the-top anime-esque style fight scenes mixed in with video game humor and graphics and things like that. I think the way he described it was like they treated the fight scenes sort of like musical numbers in a musical, or this is just a world where sometimes people break into song and dance and they do this. Well, this is just a world where people, break out a guitar that can send out shock waves and, that's just the nature.
Sense.
That's just the nature of the world. You just kind of work with it.
And plus, and people have in tuned, we have certain schemes that we understand movies by. Mm-hmm. And we understand musicals. Some people think musicals are ridiculous, but most people understand, okay, in a musical, you're going to sing after something important happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose by using that scheme, it made it easier for us to kind of go in and out of it.
Mm-hmm. It's sort of a, I guess you could sort of call it a template that they just kind of adjusted and switched. And
yeah, I suppose maybe the template is the thing that helps people deal with this. If their template of superhero movies one thing, it comes out as something else.
Yeah,
it could either be a good or a bad thing depending.
And that's true because that Zack Snyder is definitely a different sort of take on a superhero movie than say Christopher Nolan.
Exactly.
Even though Christopher Nolan was a producer on this.
I feel like Christopher Nolan added all the realism, and Zack Snyder added all the,
The
crazy stuff.
Yeah, probably. Like you said, the Mach 3 fighting,
Which
and
was
stuff like that.
it was ridiculous and fun.
Yep.
That was my main that one always comes up when I think of a movie that's just completely different that really worked. Because there's some movies that are completely different and you're like, that kind of worked.
Mm-hmm.
We always mention, Labyrinth or
Yeah.
Mirror Mask, which we saw, which actually did a pretty good job too.
Mm-hmm. That worked within the world that they were doing, basically, for it.
But it's just when it almost works, it tends to become a cult classic.
Yeah. Right, where like only certain people can really appreciate what they're trying to do. Well, we better wrap this up because
we're long already today.
This is very long, and we knew we kind of would be. So just a quick summary. Yeah.
It is a balance, because realism, and there's a lot of demand for realism nowadays because people have they've been inundated, I think, with over-the-top fantastical things.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to find that balance in a story, and each story demands a different look.
Yes.
Buckethead, if you ever read that, is purposely extravagant.
Mm-hmm.
Or Isle of Gold, which is another story of mine, is purposely written in this
literary,
and I don't write like that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's different than another story. Every story demands a certain style to tell it the best way.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to find that balance as a writer sometimes is rough. And if you break that balance somewhere, people, they get pulled out of the moment. You do a funny scene at the wrong time or a serious scene at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, real impressive. I didn't watch it. But any movie that's like one of those kind of serious comedies, or is always very interesting because sometimes you're trying to. My wife just watched Finding a Friend for the End of the World.
Okay.
I think that's what it's called. With
Never heard
Steve
of it.
Carell and Keira Knightley.
Okay.
I think. But it's about the actual end of the world, and because it's a comedy, she kind of kept thinking that the end of the world was going to be more of a joke at the end, like it wasn't actually going to end, but the world actually ends. And it makes sense in the movie, but your perceptions of what's coming when it's bordering that line of comedy and philosophy is like, is this going to, and which maybe was the point of the movie. I didn't see it, but
interesting. And I would say you're talking about from a writer how to try to find that balance. I would say as a viewer or as a reader, I'd say be willing to suspend disbelief. Meet the author halfway. Does the story work within the context of what they're trying to do? And if it doesn't, of course, that's fine. You don't have to like everything.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly, and we've said before, there's definitely a difference between liking something and recognizing it did what it set out to do. All right, anyway.
We'll move on. We keep talking, but...
Yep, we'll move on. It is time for our first soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so bear with me a minute because Nick has got a soundtrack picked on. Aaron says he loves Frog's theme, but this is not the actual soundtrack. We typically pick out a song that we play. It's kind of an inspiration for stories.
You played the whole stinger, huh?
Yeah. That's the stinger is from the theme of Frogs.
Oh yeah.
So that's why Aaron brought that up. And this is one of his ringtones, apparently. But anyway, I gotta pull this up real quick so we can play it. Nick, why don't you go ahead and set this up?
Okay, so when we're talking about realism versus fantasy, I just used it as an excuse to play a longtime favorite Overclocked remix song from the Heroes vs. Villains album, which is one of my favorites. This is remixed from Monkey Island, or Secret of Monkey Island, one of those Monkey Island games. Remixed by Diggy Diss. And it's called, I believe, he's looking it up for me, Voodoo, Roots, and Grog. And it's LeChuck's theme. And it's fabulous. And I picked it partly because there's live trombone, which is awesome. And then there's a fabulous chiptune breakdown, like halfway through it. So it's a nice combination of live music and, made up music. That's not the word I wanted. I lost my wording. But
well, yeah, live music and chiptunes, basically.
Yeah, chiptunes, which I like chiptunes. So
yeah. So, okay.
But I hope you enjoy. It's one of my favorites.
All right.
Synthesize. Thank you, Aaron.
Very nice. All right. Here we go. All right, so we're back. This has been a kind of a whirlwind thing here,
So, we're going on to our next section.
which is our take.
On Tales.
Okay, so we're going to do what we typically do around this time of the year. Actually, I was wondering, our last time we did our take on Tales might have been doing summer movies, just like we're doing now.
Might have been, yeah. But we haven't done a Take on Tales very often.
Yeah.
In the last sections.
So it's been another summer has come and gone of movies and stuff. I think we may have lost our Google Doc, but that's okay.
Oh, that's okay. We can run.
We know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So first off, as always, we talk about superhero movies.
Yes.
So
Which is most summers.
yes, but we have to go all the way back to beginning of May for the first one though. Iron Man 3.
Iron Man 3. I enjoyed Iron Man 3.
I really did too.
I thought it was better than 2.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did some really fun stuff with the suit this time around.
Well, what I really appreciate too is that they've given Tony Stark an arc. You know, he's not the same. By the end of this movie, he's very different than he was at the beginning of the first movie. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like kind of an ending.
Yeah, it really does feel like it could be an ending for the Robert Downey Jr., which I'm okay with. I mean, obviously, I hope to see him in Avengers 2.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, I want to see him do other things. I want to see other Marvel superheroes, Ant-Man of all things, apparently.
Well, why not?
Why not? I know absolutely nothing about Ant-Man, but it could be fun. It's been a really good run for Iron Man, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. Now, I'm not a hardcore Iron Man fan.
No, we know Nathan did not much care for parts of the movie.
There were certain people. If you were a hardcore Iron Man fans, I know some people didn't like what they did with
The Manchurian.
which
Which I thought was clever.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not invested in them at all.
yeah. I mean, I could see how people could get ticked off, but for not knowing anything about them, I thought it really worked for what they were doing.
It's kind of a neat thing to do because comic book movies are like comic books. They keep rewriting themselves. They're not, you know, they reinterpret the stories yet again. And I thought it was a neat way to keep people who thought they knew what was going to happen off their guard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's certainly a case where if you expect one thing and get something else.
Yeah.
But I thought it was really clever, and you know, when I made this connection back when I was watching it, I just remembered that Tony Stark keeps saying, or the Manchurian keeps saying, "Who am I?" or "I know who I am," or something along those lines. And Tony Stark says the same lines a couple times. And what's interesting is that the Manchurian seems all that, and it's just basically Tony Stark in movie 1. Mm-hmm. And Tony Stark actually has become a person of substance.
Yes.
And I thought that was a nice parallel thematically.
I can see that. So, yeah, that was pretty good. It's been months since I actually saw it, so I don't know I have too much more to say about it than that.
It was enjoyable, and the giant teddy bear was funny.
Yeah. Man of Steel, we've talked about quite a bit.
Ad nauseum. So.
I will throw one last thing in here about that, because I know some people were upset about Superman killing someone, which, again, I can see that. You know, Superman has a pretty high ethical code of not killing people. But again, I go back to this is a brand new Superman. He doesn't know what he's doing. And honestly, you could devote an entire movie. They have done a whole Superman movies in some of the animated one that has been about that very issue. So I thought it was, in the moment, a pretty natural response.
And given what Superman had, what do you do with a man like Zod?
Yeah.
Or a Kryptonian like Zod?
Yeah. I mean, eventually, are you
going
to put him in jail?
He doesn't have access to the Phantom Zone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this current Superman.
Yeah. So, I mean, even if it wasn't in the manner that they depicted, which, you know, I can see how that could have been handled a little bit different. I mean, I do agree with some people. It would have been nice to kind of see Superman helping rebuild Metropolis afterwards, instead of just kind of that, hey, you better just trust me now sort of thing. It would have been nice to kind of see him, you know, helping dig people out of rubble and stuff like that.
Yeah, they kind of built that danger to him. Like, if he wasn't good, he'd be horrible.
Right. But, and I kind of have a funny feeling that it will be a major feature of the next one. You know, kind of like how I was the only one, it felt like, who had a major problem with the way The Dark Knight ended. I have a feeling that, and then it came back in The Dark Knight Rises, the way they lied to the public. I have a feeling this will come back in the next Superman movie. Yeah. So, anyway,
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the Wolverine.
Wolverine, which I did not have a chance to see. Natasha and I wanted to see it, and it just didn't work out this summer.
Yep.
At this point,
I did get to see it. It was fun. The funny thing is, I enjoyed the first Wolverine, the Wolverine prequel. I don't remember it being as bad as it's kind of a reputation for. I mean, it was also it was kind of forgettable. I mean, I'll grant you that. I never really much thought of it after I saw it.
Yeah.
But I didn't see it as bad. But this was I enjoyed this one too. I was pleased, because Wolverine is one of these characters that, again, in the comics, he's kind of become like Batman. He's a bit overdone. He can get a little too dark. But this one, I felt like they did a nice kind of noir, for lack of a better. In some ways, it's kind of a noir type story. Just kind of dark settings and crime organizations and all this kind of stuff.
Which I think he gets occasionally in his own comic.
He does when he's on his own. Yeah. He does get that, and I felt it worked out pretty well. Again, I don't know that it didn't stick with me as much as Iron Man 3 or Man of Steel did. I don't think. Again, not saying it was bad. It just, like, I'd thought about Man of Steel for a long time afterwards, and even before a lot of the controversy bubbled up, I was thinking about themes and ideas in that one.
Yeah, it was another. It was built in to have things represent different ideas and have opinions on.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't necessarily just about, hey, look, he won or didn't win.
Yeah. And Wolverine, I love thinking, man, there were a lot of people who got stabbed in that. So anyway, okay, so those are the 3 superhero movies from this summer, and looking forward to seeing the next Thor in November.
Yes.
So that'll be fun. But let's head back to May for Star Trek Into Darkness.
Which actually I saw a lot later than everyone else.
Oh, did you?
I saw it a couple weeks after it came out.
Okay, yeah, I kind of remember that.
Very enjoyable.
Yes.
I mean, the new Star Treks are much more action movie than the old Star Treks.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think sometimes annoys hardcore Star Trek fans, but people in general tend to really like them.
Mm-hmm.
But they do a really good job of character, I think,
mm-hmm.
of just enjoyable characters.
Yeah, interesting. The movie was called Star Trek Into Darkness, so he wondered, this is going to kind of continue the dark trend, and it did have some of that, and a lot of it felt very, personal. Had the terrorism, illusions and stuff like that, but my sister pointed out it was kind of fun. She felt it was less dark than the last Star Trek prequel because, in the other one, 2 planets get blown up.
That's true.
Vulcan and Romulan, in 2 different universes, but still 2 different planets.
Well, because it was a very personal conflict.
Yeah. Yeah.
In many ways.
But which was interesting to me because I realized, that's true, but I didn't really think of it necessarily. And I think it's that kind of degree of separation. This one felt darker in some ways because it was more personal. Like, we can relate to that stuff more than...
Well, because we blow up a planet, how do you weep for... Alderaan dies,
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yes.
You take off your blast shield helmet and,
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Now, Aaron is saying, halfway through the movie, I freaking hated it. It was like, dear God, if you're going to do Wrath of Khan, do Wrath of Khan. But the end made things so much better.
And it's a weird thing because it's like very different than Khan, and simultaneously it like constantly references Khan.
Yeah.
And reverses a lot of the primal moments of the original.
Yeah. Personally, I didn't feel like they were duplicating Wrath of Khan. I felt like they were kind of putting their own spin on things.
It was an interesting balance of like new stuff and like very obvious homages.
Mm-hmm. Like Spock yelling Khan and Kirk dying instead of Spock, and spoiler alert. Sorry. But I enjoyed the...
And that's a movie I've heard
twist.
people complain about fuzzy logic or, which probably does have, but it runs at such a pace that you don't even care.
Yeah.
Which I suppose makes Star Trek fans who like the
Yeah.
exact things.
Yeah.
Monkey. I mean, because it is a very different way of approaching Star Trek.
It is. It's not quite as hardcore cerebral.
I mean, it's like a Star Trek film like a Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways.
Which will be interesting to see if the next Star Wars is a little bit done more like a Star Trek. Because I think in the last episode we didn't know who was going to direct the new Star Wars.
No, not last time.
And I don't think J.J. Abrams was even one that we had considered.
We were like, he had said no, he's not going to.
Yeah, or like he's doing Star Trek. Of course, he's not going to do Star Wars too.
Yeah.
So anyway, I look forward to seeing the new smoke monster and the Star Wars mythology.
Wow. You had to throw Lost in there, didn't you?
Of course.
I had something I was going to throw in earlier. I forgot. Oh, well.
Do you remember it?
Just vaguely. You were talking about expectations and, and realism fantasy. I mean, Lost did a very good job of slowly expanding what you expected out of the island.
Yes.
So that by season 4, when it disappears, you're like, that was really weird, but okay.
Yes.
I mean, you can't do that with that takes effort to plan, to make I mean, some people were like, that's ridiculous, but enough people got to the point where they'd buy about anything.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, and even that's, I guess part of that is because it was an ongoing series, and like, well, maybe they'll explain it, but then there are other people like, I don't think we're going to get all this ever explained. Yeah. So, and then that's, again, kind of where your differing tastes in reaction to the finale.
But never mind there. We've talked
ad nauseum about the finale. We don't need to go back into that.
And then we had Lone Ranger, which you did not see, right?
I did not see Lone Ranger, so...
I don't know. It was kind of a fun popcorn movie. Mm-hmm. Like, when I tell people that parts of it was fun. The final action scene, the last 10-15 minutes, was just a blast. I mean, you got William Terrell Overture, and it just... My sort of like, woohoo, let's have fun. But it's kind of overlong, and it kind of drags at points, which you really shouldn't have a movie like Lone Ranger do that. Mm-hmm. It just, if it had been trimmed down and narrowed, it might have been a lot more entertaining. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you something as someone who hasn't seen it, just curious about other people's reactions. I saw one reviewer... heard someone say that like they sort of seemed ashamed in the sense of their heritage, like they didn't, because you look at a lot of the posters, it looks like Johnny Depp looks ridiculous the way he's dressed, but they put more attention on Johnny Depp and this like Native American thing.
I don't think I've ever watched the original Lone Ranger.
Well, I've never watched it. I've heard some radio drama,
but you could tell that they were kind of trying to distance themselves from. They would make. Like he goes hi-oh silver, and then Johnny Depp says, "Don't ever do that again." I mean, they're trying to update it. They're trying to be Lone Ranger without any of the Lone Ranger stuff in some ways. Uh-huh. And you can tell that there was this issue of how we treated Native Americans underneath everything, because like it's really kind of depressing. At the end, like when the credits were rolling, just old Tonto just walking off in the distance for like 6 minutes, and with this kind of depressing music.
That's a weird way to end a Disney blockbuster. Yeah,
so there obviously was some concern about how we treat Native Americans, which was horrible in many cases. Mm-hmm. But it was kind of a weird thing to put inside of the Disney movie. I don't know, there were just lots of elements that like didn't quite gel, or it was too much, or it was just gangly.
Yeah, I kind of get a sense that Hollywood doesn't really know how to do a family-friendly blockbuster Western anymore. Like, you can get people like the Coen brothers who do True Grit, and that's, they'll do a pretty, authentic, realistic kind of Western. But it's like we don't know how to do a fantasy, a more fairy tale Americana Western anymore.
Black and white things are hard to get away with. I mean, we'll do it in, just your Die Hard sort of deals. Mm-hmm.
Terrorists
and stuff, because that's kind of the accepted black and white thing. But yeah, the Western's complicated. It's been complicated. Yeah. In the modern mind.
And if you for people like Brian, he prefers the more complicated things like The Searchers anyway.
Which is a fabulous movie.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. That's true. Brosnan points out Mask of Zorro,
which is a very good one.
Yeah, I could see that.
Actually, Lone Ranger reminded me of Mask of Zorro. But Mask of Zorro was better. Okay. I mean, I think just generally rewatch value and stuff. Okay. Though, I could watch that last 15-minute action thing, a couple times.
By itself.
By itself. It was pretty awesome.
Okay, cool.
Largely because I love music and action put together.
That's nice. Yeah, we need more action scenes set to classical music.
Yes. So I think we need a whole movie that's just action scenes with music.
I was thinking actually earlier today how interesting it would be to have like, even if it was just a short film, like a silent action movie, completely instrumental the whole way through, no dialogue.
I saw a short film like that somewhere. It was crazy. But it was all silent. I don't know if it was instrumental, but it was all silent. It was all through a Go Cam thing, on your head.
Oh, okay.
It was like 8 minutes of him running around and jumping down places and killing people.
Oh, interesting. Oh, I might have heard of this.
That thing was nuts.
I'll have to go check it out.
Yeah,
now.
it was cool. If we find it, we'll put it in the show notes.
Cool. Very cool. Well, final summer movie that I had on the list to talk about was Pacific Rim,
which I have not seen.
I did see it. I enjoyed it. I don't think I loved it as much as some people did. Giant robots and giant monster things. It's just not my shtick. Like I said, I enjoyed what they did with it. That was fun, but like at the end, I was like, I'm not gonna be like head over heels in love with it.
Yeah.
I did like. I liked what they did with some of the cinematography. Again, editing was a bit of a problem because I felt like there were some fights where it was kind of hard to tell what had happened. But at the same time, I really like what they did with some of the camera shots and like the colors, especially. There's sort of a tendency in a lot of Man of Steel did this. It's an artistic choice to do kind of this. Not quite monochromatic, sort of
muted
kind of tones to everything. But the director Del Toro for this, he chose to have lots of colors in it because there's not in every scene. There's like I think one of the opening ones they're like in the middle of the ocean, and that one's not quite as much. But like toward the second half of the movie, especially like there's a big fight in Tokyo, of course.
Well, yeah.
And they use all the neon signs and stuff, and it's all very vibrant colors too. So that's pretty cool. And then the last scene is actually on the bottom of the ocean, but by this vent, which this vent is where like all these extra dimensional creatures are coming from, basically. So that's where they fight in the bottom of the sea, and it's really cool, like the reds and the heat that's coming out from it. And I got some at the very end. I was getting some vibes of Ava with like the digital clock counting down and this kind of stuff. Actually, I got vibes of Ava occasionally.
Well, you have people driving giant robots,
right, and it didn't grab me emotionally nearly as much as Ava would.
I don't know what
yeah. But it does make me think, having seen this, I do believe now that a live-action Ava movie would be possible if they were foolhardy enough to do it.
I'd have to go see it, but
I know you.
I may never recover. We're still waiting on Ava 3, aren't we? Isn't that supposed to come out pretty soon?
That's a good question. I don't remember if it's come out in the Japan, because sometimes we get things like a year after this come out in Japan.
Did we do the Take on Tales on the Ava movie? We should sometime on all of them.
Possibly. I know we've mentioned we really liked Ava 2.
Yeah, it was really very good.
Which honestly, we should probably watch them again sometime because that's been a while ago.
Yeah.
So okay. Anyway, I think that's all the summer movies I got.
We missed Monsters University.
Yeah, I really wanted to see that, and hopefully still will, because I don't think it's hit the Dollar Theater in Fort Wayne yet.
I don't think I saw almost any other movies this summer. I just watched Oblivion.
Oh yeah,
first time. That was interesting.
Oh, okay.
Good sci-fi.
That's the Tom Cruise one, right?
Very, very truly sci-fi, which you don't get a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of felt the summer movies were more manageable this year in some ways, in terms of ones that I really wanted to see.
Yeah.
Did you see Despicable Me 2?
No, I did not.
Okay, I didn't see that. But there was I felt like after Star Trek Into Darkness, it was like a month before I saw the next one. Some summers you're like, oh man, there's all kinds of stuff I want to see. This summer's like, I kind of want to see this and this, and that'll be.
There are other ones I'm like, oh, I could see that, but I don't have time.
Yeah. Yeah, you were traveling all over this summer.
It was a very busy summer, and things are settling down into a decent rhythm now. That's most enjoyable.
Okay, real quick, we'll do one final segment. I don't have the stinger ready for this right now because I wasn't expecting to do a listener feedback until earlier today.
Listener feedback.
But real quick, our one of our longtime listeners, Greg Meyer, he found out that we were going to be doing this. I told him about it last night. I don't think he was able to listen to it live stream, but he did send us an email, which I'll just read real quick because I haven't actually had a chance to read it, or at least maybe we'll skim through some of it. He says, "Hey, Tim and Nick, I'm so glad to hear the podcast is back. Didn't know where to turn for a good podcast on story creation," which, yeah, I don't really know.
I haven't looked either, but
No, that's true.
because ours is the best. So
In the interim between podcast episodes, I tried creating Tim and Nick stick figures to take your place, but they wouldn't stop talking about Lost, Star Wars, and Muppets. I have no idea what you're talking about.
we never talk about those things.
When the subject of early children's literature came up, they tumbled over the edge of my desk, arguing over which Dr. Seuss book was the best. Sadly, we'll never know all the places they'd go.
You know what? You know what Dr. Seuss book has been reading to Theo a lot?
What?
If I Owned a Circus. You ever read that one? With the Circus McGurkus?
I think so, yeah.
He loves it. It takes like 15, 20 minutes to read to him because it's just ridiculously long. But he likes it.
I remember I used to have my aunts read to me, or I would read or have someone read A Cat in the Hat like over and over and over again until it got to a point actually, I don't know if they read it completely, but they used to say it wasn't any fun to read stories to me because they couldn't like skip words or make stuff up. Dr.
Seuss is long. It takes an investment of time to read one of those books.
But I would know well enough and be like, no, go back, read that. And, they were teenage. I had very young aunts at the time, and so they were teenagers, and so they'd try to skip stuff, and I wouldn't let them get away with it. So anyway, question for Greg puts to us. Says, a few months ago, graphic novelist Doug TenNapel said, paraphrasing here, that the way for the audience to care about your characters is to show them suffering. While I know characters need to grow, is there a limit to how much you make your characters suffer? Oh yes, this is something he's suggested for us, and I think that could be a whole story school in the future.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that'll be something interesting about that. So thanks, Greg. We're glad that you're listening. We're glad to be back.
Why don't we do that for our next one?
So talk about suffering in stories.
Yeah. I mean, we've done that once before. We can do a different angle. Didn't we do suffering once?
We've talked about tragedy.
Oh, okay.
So I think we have a little different angle.
Okay, good. Why not?
So, I was kind of hoping to grab another one of Aaron's comments because Aaron's been great in commenting through this whole thing, but he's usually like a few minutes behind just because that's the way the broadcast kind of works. He's like in a different time stream.
Nice Doctor Who reference there.
Thank you. He points out Hot Fuzz, the movie changed 3 different times, but they subtly warn you that the template of the movie is changing, which is true. It's a pretty good.
You know what? I've never seen Hot Fuzz.
You have? I thought you had. I thought
Natasha has.
Oh.
There's probably a great many movies that I have not seen that she has.
Because she watches it while you're at work.
Well, I'm at youth group, or I'm at work, or I'm writing, and so I go in and watch it.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Yeah, because the first part is kind of it kind of starts as a buddy comedy, and then it sort of transitions into a kind of weird mystery thing, and then like the last third of it is this overblown action thing.
Nice.
With like guns and old ladies with the shotguns and stuff like that. So pretty fun stuff. So that's a good example of kind of transitioning multiple templates within the same one. He also said that his wife enjoyed Iron Man 3, but saw an article where someone pitched a plot for a movie that included a more traditional Mandarin. She was sad that the movie didn't work. So yeah, interesting. It'd be cool to hear how it sounded out. Also, the apparent, and Aaron is a comics fan, so he would know this. He says the problem with Iron Man is that he has almost no good villains. This would be like making Lex a joke in a Superman movie. So, anyway, which I look for. I'm sure Lex will probably be in the next Superman movie whenever that comes out.
Yeah.
Oh, Aaron corrects me. Says it was Hong Kong, not Tokyo. Which I just took it for granted it was Tokyo because
it's Tokyo.
Yeah, it's Tokyo. It's just the sort of thing that happens there.
Like every 5 years or something like that.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a bit of that's a taste of some of the conversation. Sorry we haven't really been able to conversate back with you, Brosman, because
we need to set it up so we can type back to him at least.
Yeah.
While
we're doing it.
Yeah.
What we need, Nick, is we need like a multi-screen setup here because right now we're just doing this off my laptop. Yeah. And
so if anyone has a great deal of money just hanging around they don't know what to do with, Tim Deal will take it.
Gladly. Okay. Well, anyway.
Or if you happen to be from Nigeria.
Yes, sure. All right. Well, we better bow out because this is turning into a pretty long episode, and it's not even like our anniversary or something. But it's a great comeback. It's been great to come back and be with you guys and have you guys hear our beautiful voices again. So, Nick, why don't you set us up some contact info here?
All right, so you can always email us, and we love email, at derailedtrains@gmail.com. Our podcast will be hosted at derailedtrainsofthought.blogspot.com and also available on iTunes. It may be a few days before we figure out how to get all that worked out with the live streaming.
Yeah, hopefully it shouldn't take too long. Well, yeah, it may be Saturday or something. Yeah. It should be available to play right away on Mixler. On Mixler.
We'll put a link on our.
Yeah, but we'll put it on the blog, and that will get it hooked into the iTunes feed and all that. Okay. When's the next time we'll be recording? Do you think? I guess we don't know, right? We haven't really planned.
We should have planned that out. Probably 2 Thursdays from now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, probably.
Or you mean 2 weeks from now? Yeah.
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 2 weeks from now, or are we going to do
monthly?
Or yeah,
we'll get back to you.
Yeah, we're not sure if we're doing this bi-weekly again or we're doing monthly. It might be more doable to do bi-weekly again if we can churn it out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. For my soundtrack to close us out here, I'm going with something from the awesome OC Remix album, Balance and Ruin.
It is awesome.
It is. This is the one we've been waiting for. You know we love Final Fantasy VI. If you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, we've had Final Fantasy VI songs on here
numerous times.
And this is. I gotta figure out. See, I think this is on this too.
Come on, Balance of Ruin is like 8 hours of free music or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's actually 6 hours of free music.
And it's all good.
It's all good.
There's only like a handful of stuff that I'll skip. And actually, I'll say my one complaint, Nick, is there's not enough Celeste on it.
Oh wow!
Like there's her theme is in like 3 times within the opera tracks.
Well, that's about it, though, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but when they come back after the ruin, the whole story is about her at first.
Yeah.
There's a whole scene where she's
on
the
cliff. It is surprising they don't have another one by herself.
Yeah, just that.
And there's not enough Kefka.
Yeah.
No, there's playing Kefka. I could always use Kefka.
That's probably true.
It's one of my favorite tracks.
Okay, where is the one I'm looking for? Oh, there it is. Okay, so the track I chose for soundtrack today is called Bad Octopus. This is by Fishy with some help from a guy called XPRT.
Expert Novice.
Oh, Expert Novice. Okay, well, that makes sense. And I say this correlates to our theme. Final Fantasy VI has got a lot of very dramatic moments in it. The world gets destroyed. Character attempts suicide. There's very dramatic moments, a very dramatic soundtrack. But then you also got some really ridiculous stuff in it too. It blends it like it blends the ridiculous and the dramatic probably better than any Final Fantasy. You've got ninjas, a girl who can draw and monsters come out of it, and all kinds of stuff. And this song, I think, pretty well emulates it. It's called Bad Octopus, inspired by a minor villain who's an octopus.
Who's ridiculous.
Yeah, who is pretty ridiculous. And it alternates pretty well from the rock and dramatic to the absolute goofy insane. So I hope you enjoy. So until next time, this has been Tim.
This has been Nick.
And we will see you next time.
Adios.
Bye.